The bride stumbled through the frozen Montana wilderness in nothing but her torn wedding dress, blood seeping from a gash on her forehead, her lips turning blue from the merciless January cold of 1884. Marianne Thompson had never imagined her wedding day would end with her running for her life through knee-deep snow, the sounds of gunfire still echoing in her ears as the stagecoach carrying her and her new husband lay overturned somewhere behind her in the darkness. She could not think about what had happened to Gerald, could not let herself remember the way his eyes had gone empty when the bullet struck him during the robbery. All she could do was keep moving forward, one frozen foot in front of the other, even as her body screamed for her to stop and rest. The wind howled through the pine trees, cutting through her dress like knives. She had lost feeling in her fingers hours ago, and her teeth chattered so violently she had bitten her tongue bloody. The sun had set what felt like an eternity ago, and the moon offered little comfort as it cast long shadows across the snow. She did not know where she was going or if she was even moving in the right direction. All she knew was that if she stopped, she would die. Then through the swirling snow she saw it, a flickering light in the distance, warm and golden and impossibly beautiful. A cabin, shelter, hope. Marianne forced her legs to move faster, though each step sent daggers of pain through her frozen feet. She could barely feel the ground beneath her anymore, but the light drew her forward like a beacon. She had to reach it. She had to survive. The cabin grew larger as she approached, and she could make out smoke rising from a chimney. Someone was home, someone who could help her. Or someone who might finish what the robbers had started. But she had no choice. She would rather die quickly by a bullet than slowly freeze to death in the wilderness. Her hand, barely functioning, reached for the door. She tried to knock but had no strength left. Instead, she fell against it, her body giving out completely. The door swung open under her weight, and she collapsed onto a wooden floor, her consciousness fading. The last thing she heard was a man's startled voice saying, "Good Lord," before everything went black. When Marianne opened her eyes again, warmth surrounded her. Real warmth, not the dangerous false warmth that had been trying to lull her to sleep in the snow. She was lying in a bed, covered in heavy quilts and furs, and a fire crackled somewhere nearby. For a moment she thought she had died and gone to heaven. "You are awake," a deep voice said. Marianne turned her head slowly, every muscle in her body protesting the movement. A man sat in a chair beside the bed, his face illuminated by the firelight. He was perhaps 30 years old, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes that seemed to hold both kindness and wariness in equal measure. His jaw was covered in stubble, and he wore a simple wool shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. "Where am I?" Marianne managed to whisper, her throat raw from screaming into the wind. "My cabin. About 15 miles outside of Helena," the man replied. "My name is Xavier Zimmerman. I found you collapsed at my door about 3 hours ago. You were half frozen to death." Marianne tried to sit up, but Xavier raised a hand to stop her. "Easy now. You have got frostbite on your fingers and toes. Nothing too severe, I think, but you need to rest. I cleaned the wound on your head and got you warmed up, but your body has been through hell." The memories came flooding back then. The wedding ceremony in the small church in Billings. The joy she had felt despite barely knowing Gerald, believing that she was starting a new life as a rancher's wife. The stagecoach ride that was supposed to take them to his property. The bandits who had appeared out of nowhere, their faces covered, their guns blazing, Gerald falling. The coach overturning. Her running through the snow. "My husband," she said, tears streaming down her face. "There was a robbery. The stagecoach. He was shot. I do not know if he is alive or dead. I just ran. I just left him there." Xavier's expression softened. You did what you had to do to survive. That is nothing to be ashamed of. When the storm clears, I will ride out and see what I can find. But right now, you need to focus on getting better." "I should not be here," Marianne said, suddenly aware that she was wearing only a nightgown, one that must belong to Xavier. "This is not proper. I am a married woman. What will people think?" Xavier stood and walked to the fire, adding another log. "I think people will understand that I saved a woman from freezing to death. Your wedding dress was soaked through and frozen solid. I had to get you out of it or you would have died. I put you in one of my shirts and got you warm. That is all. I did what any decent person would do." Marianne felt heat rise to her cheeks, though whether from fever or embarrassment she could not tell. "I am sorry. I did not mean to suggest that you had done anything improper. I just do not know what to think right now. Everything has happened so fast." "You have been through a terrible ordeal," Xavier said gently. "You do not need to apologize for anything. Just rest now. We will figure everything else out later." But Marianne could not rest. Her mind raced with questions and fears. What had happened to Gerald? Were the robbers still out there? How would she survive in this harsh land with no money, no family, and possibly no husband? She had left everything behind in New York to come west and marry a man she had only known through letters. Her parents had died the previous year, leaving her with nothing but debts, and when Gerald's proposal had arrived through a matchmaking service, it had seemed like a miracle. A chance to start over, to build a new life. Now that life lay shattered around her like broken glass. Xavier brought her broth and bread, helping her sit up enough to eat. His hands were gentle but calloused, the hands of a man who worked hard for his living. As she ate, Marianne studied him more carefully. He was handsome in a rugged way, with a strong jawline and eyes that seemed to see more than they let on. There was a sadness in those eyes, she thought, a loneliness that matched her own. "You live here alone?" she asked between sips of broth. Xavier nodded. "I do. Have for about 5 years now. I work a small ranch, raise cattle and horses. It is not much, but it is mine." "No wife?" The question slipped out before Marianne could stop it, and she immediately regretted her forwardness. "I am sorry, that is none of my business." "No wife," Xavier confirmed, his voice carefully neutral. "I was engaged once back in Colorado. She decided ranch life was not for her and went back east with a banker. That was 7 years ago. I came to Montana to start fresh." "I am sorry," Marianne said softly. Xavier shrugged. "It was for the best. Better to find out before the wedding than after. Now eat. You need to get your strength back." Marianne obeyed, feeling the warm broth spread through her body like liquid sunshine. She had not realized how hungry she was until she started eating. Xavier sat back down in his chair, watching the fire, giving her privacy to eat without feeling observed. "How old are you?" Xavier asked after a while, his tone conversational. 22, Marianne replied. "I celebrated my birthday on the train coming west. How old are you?" 29, Xavier said. "I will be 30 in March." They fell into silence again, but it was not uncomfortable. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, but inside the cabin, everything felt safe and warm. Marianne finished her broth and lay back against the pillows, exhaustion pulling at her. "Thank you," she whispered, "for saving my life." "You are welcome," Xavier replied. "Now sleep. Everything will look different in the morning." But morning brought no relief. The storm had intensified overnight, and when Marianne woke, she could hear the wind screaming like a living thing. Xavier was already up, dressed in heavy clothes and boots, preparing to go outside. "I need to check on the animals," he explained when he saw her awake. "The barn is only about 50 feet from the cabin, but in this weather it might as well be a mile. I will be back as soon as I can." There is more broth on the stove if you are hungry." He left before Marianne could respond, and she heard the door slam shut behind him. She tried to get out of bed but found her legs would not support her weight. The frostbite Xavier had mentioned must be worse than he had let on. She managed to pull herself to the edge of the bed and examine her feet. They were wrapped in clean bandages, and when she carefully unwrapped one, she saw that several of her toes were blackened and blistered. Fear gripped her heart. Would she lose her toes? Would she ever walk properly again? How would she survive in this harsh land if she was crippled? The door opened again, letting in a blast of cold air along with Xavier, who was covered in snow from head to toe. He stomped his feet and brushed himself off before coming closer to the fire. "The animals are fine," he said, "but this storm is not letting up any time soon. We might be stuck here for days." "My feet," Marianne said, her voice trembling. "I looked at them. They are black. Am I going to lose them?" Xavier came over and knelt beside the bed, gently taking her foot in his hands. He examined it with a practiced eye, then carefully rewrapped the bandage. "I will not lie to you. You might lose a toe or two, but I have seen worse frostbite than this, and the people kept their feet. We just need to keep them clean and warm and hope for the best. I have some salve that should help." "How do you know so much about this?" Marianne asked. "I was a medic in the army for a couple of years before I became a rancher," Xavier explained. "Saw plenty of frostbite during winter campaigns. I am not a doctor, but I know enough to help." Over the next 3 days, as the storm raged outside, Marianne and Xavier fell into an easy routine. He would wake early to tend the animals, then come back and make breakfast for both of them. He changed her bandages twice a day, applying the salve with gentle hands. They talked to pass the time, sharing stories of their lives. Marianne learned that Xavier had grown up on a farm in Ohio, the youngest of 6 children. His father had been a stern man who believed in hard work and little else. Xavier had joined the army at 18 to escape the farm, only to find himself in battles he had never wanted to fight. After his service, he had tried to settle in Colorado with his fiancée, but when that failed, he had come to Montana seeking solitude and peace. "I wanted a place where I could work with my hands and not have to answer to anyone," Xavier told her. "The ranch is small, but it is mine. Every fence post, every building I built with my own 2 hands. That means something." In turn, Marianne shared her own story. She had grown up in New York City, the only child of a shopkeeper and his wife. Her father had run a small bookstore, and Marianne had spent her childhood surrounded by stories and dreams. When her parents died of influenza within days of each other, the debts they had hidden from her came to light. The bookstore had to be sold to pay creditors, leaving Marianne with nothing. "I had nowhere to go," she explained. "No family, no money, no prospects. A friend told me about the matchmaking service, about men out west looking for wives. It seemed like my only option. Gerald's letters were kind, and he promised me a good life on his ranch. I thought I was being practical, making a smart choice. I never imagined it would end like this." "You still do not know that it has ended," Xavier pointed out. "Gerald might have survived. When the storm clears, we will find out." But Marianne had seen the look in Gerald's eyes when the bullet struck him. She knew, deep in her heart, that her husband was dead. She had been married for less than an hour before she became a widow. On the 4th day, the storm finally broke. The sun came out, brilliant and blinding against the snow, and Xavier prepared to ride out to search for the stagecoach. Marianne wanted to go with him, but she still could not walk more than a few steps without pain. "I will find out what happened," Xavier promised. "And I will bring back anything I can. Just stay warm and rest." He left on his horse, a sturdy roan mare named Ruby, and Marianne watched from the window as he disappeared into the white landscape. The hours crawled by like days. She tried to keep busy, washing dishes and tidying the cabin as best she could while hobbling around on her injured feet. But her mind kept returning to Xavier, wondering if he was safe, if he would find Gerald, if he would come back. It was nearly dark when she finally heard the sound of hoofbeats outside. Marianne pulled herself to the window and saw Xavier returning, but he was not alone. He was leading a second horse, and there was a body wrapped in canvas tied across its back. Her heart sank. Gerald. Xavier came inside, his expression grim. "I found the stagecoach about 10 miles from here. The driver and your husband were both dead. The robbers had stripped the coach of anything valuable and left. I am sorry, Marianne. There was nothing I could do." Marianne nodded, tears streaming down her face. She had known, had been preparing herself for this news, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way it had not been before. "Thank you for bringing him back. He deserves a proper burial." "The ground is too frozen to dig right now," Xavier said gently. "But I will build a coffin and keep him in the barn until the thaw comes. Then we will bury him properly with words said over him. I promise." "You are a good man, Xavier Zimmerman," Marianne whispered. Xavier looked away, uncomfortable with the praise. "I am just doing what is right. Now you should eat something. I brought back what I could from the stagecoach. Your trunk was still there, though the robbers had gone through it. Most of your clothes are intact." Having her own clothes back gave Marianne a small measure of comfort. That evening, she changed into one of her dresses, a simple gray wool that was practical and warm. It felt strange to be wearing proper clothes again after days in Xavier's oversized shirt, but it also made her feel more like herself. As the days turned into weeks, Marianne slowly healed. Her feet improved, and while she did lose one toe to frostbite, she kept the rest. She learned to walk again, first with Xavier's help, then on her own. The cabin became familiar to her, every corner and crevice known as well as if she had lived there her whole life. Xavier built a coffin for Gerald, fashioning it from planks he had stored in the barn. It was simple but well made, and Marianne helped him sand it smooth. They did not talk much during the work, but the shared silence felt companionable rather than awkward. "What will you do?" Xavier asked one evening as they sat by the fire. "After we bury Gerald, I mean, will you go back east?" Marianne had been thinking about this question for days. "I have nothing to go back to. No family, no money, no home. I used every penny I had to come west. I suppose I will need to find work somewhere. Maybe as a teacher or a housekeeper. I can read and write and do sums." Surely someone in Helena needs those skills. Xavier was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, as if he was weighing each word. "You could stay here." Marianne's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "I mean you could stay here in this cabin and help me with the ranch. I could use an extra pair of hands, and you need a place to live. It would be a practical arrangement. I would pay you wages, and you would have room and board. It would not be charity. You would earn your keep." "People would talk," Marianne said softly. "A widow living alone with a bachelor, it would not be proper." "People always talk," Xavier replied. "But you would have your own room, and I would respect your privacy. I am not suggesting anything improper. I am just offering you a place to stay and work to do. What you choose to do after that is up to you." Marianne looked into the fire, watching the flames dance and flicker. She knew what Xavier was offering was more than just employment. It was kindness, generosity, and maybe something else, something neither of them was ready to name yet. "Let me think about it," she said finally. "Take all the time you need," Xavier agreed. The thaw came in early March, and with it, the time to bury Gerald. Xavier had mentioned the death to the sheriff in Helena during one of his supply runs, and word had spread. On the day of the burial, a small group gathered at Xavier's ranch. The local preacher came to say words over the grave, and a few townspeople attended out of respect for the dead. Marianne stood by the grave, dressed in black, her face pale but composed. She had not loved Gerald, had barely known him, but he had been her husband, and she owed him her tears. As the preacher spoke about eternal rest and heavenly reward, Marianne found herself thinking not about Gerald but about Xavier, who stood a few feet away, his hat in his hands, his expression solemn. Xavier had been so kind to her, so patient and gentle. He had saved her life and asked for nothing in return. In the weeks they had lived together, she had come to know him as a man of quiet strength and deep integrity. He worked hard from dawn to dusk, caring for his animals and his land with a dedication that was almost spiritual. He read books in the evening, surprising her with his love of poetry and history. He made her laugh with his dry humor and comforted her when the nightmares came, when she woke screaming from dreams of the robbery and the frozen wilderness. She had not meant to fall in love with him. It had happened slowly, like ice melting in the spring sun, so gradually that she had not noticed until the feeling was already there, warm and undeniable in her chest. After the service, the townspeople expressed their condolences and left. The preacher lingered to speak with Marianne privately. "What are your plans, Mrs. Thompson?" he asked kindly. "Do you have family you can return to?" "No family," Marianne replied. "But I have been offered employment here, helping Mr. Zimmerman with his ranch. I think I will accept." The preacher's eyebrows rose slightly. "I see. Well, Mr. Zimmerman is a good man from what I know of him, but you must be aware of how such an arrangement might appear to others. A young widow living with a bachelor, even with the best of intentions, will cause talk." "I am aware," Marianne said firmly. "But I have few options, and Mr. Zimmerman has been nothing but honorable. I will not let gossip dictate my choices." The preacher nodded slowly. "Very well. But if you should need anything, or if circumstances change, the church is always here to help." After he left, Marianne found Xavier in the barn grooming Ruby. He looked up when she entered, his expression questioning. "I want to accept your offer," Marianne said, "if it still stands." Xavier set down the brush and turned to face her fully. "It stands, but I want you to be sure. This is not an easy life, Marianne. The winters are brutal, the work is hard, and the loneliness can eat at you. I do not want you to agree just because you feel you have no other choice." "I do have other choices," Marianne said. "I could go to Helena and find work there. I could try to scrape together enough money to go back east. But I do not want those things. I want to stay here with you and build something good, if you will have me." Something shifted in Xavier's expression, a softening around his eyes. "Then I will have you." "Welcome to the ranch, Marianne Thompson." They shook hands, a formal gesture that felt both too little and too much. As their hands clasped, Marianne felt a jolt of electricity run through her. From the way Xavier's breath caught, she thought he felt it too. Life on the ranch settled into a new rhythm. Marianne took over the cooking and cleaning, freeing Xavier to focus more on the animals and the land. She learned to milk the cow, gather eggs from the chickens, and tend the vegetable garden Xavier had planted near the cabin. She proved to be a quick learner, adapting to ranch life with a determination that impressed Xavier. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire and talk. Xavier taught Marianne to play chess, and she taught him songs she remembered from her childhood. They read to each other from the small collection of books Xavier owned, taking turns with voices and characters. It was a simple life, but Marianne found a contentment in it that she had never known before. As spring turned to summer, the ranch flourished. Xavier's cattle were healthy and multiplying, and he was able to sell several horses at a good price in Helena. With the extra money, he made improvements to the cabin, adding a separate bedroom for Marianne so she would have more privacy. He insisted on this despite Marianne's protests that she was fine sleeping in the main room. "You deserve your own space," Xavier said firmly as he hammered the last board into place. "And it will help with the talk in town. If people know you have your own room, they cannot say I am taking advantage." The new room was small but cozy, with a window that looked out over the mountains. Marianne hung curtains she had sewn herself and arranged her few belongings with care. It was the first space that had been truly hers since her parents died, and she treasured it. One evening in late June, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, Xavier spoke suddenly. "I need to tell you something, Marianne. I have been thinking about it for weeks, and I cannot keep it to myself any longer." Marianne's heart began to pound. "What is it?" Xavier turned to look at her, his eyes intense in the fading light. "I have feelings for you, more than just friendship or partnership. I know it has not been long since Gerald died, and I know you probably do not feel the same way, but I cannot lie to you or pretend. I care about you deeply, and I wanted you to know." Marianne felt tears spring to her eyes. "Xavier, I have feelings for you too. I have for weeks now. But I did not know if it was right, if it was too soon, if I was betraying Gerald's memory." "Gerald would not want you to be alone and unhappy," Xavier said gently. "He would want you to live and find joy where you can. At least, that is what I would want if I were in his place." "I barely knew him," Marianne confessed. "We were married for less than an hour. I mourned him because he was a human being who died violently, and because I felt responsible somehow, but I did not love him. I could not have loved him. We were strangers." Xavier reached out and took her hand. "You do not need to justify your feelings to me or to anyone. The heart knows what it knows." "What do we do now?" Marianne asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We take our time," Xavier said. "We do not rush. We let this grow naturally, and when we are both ready, we make it official. I want to marry you, Marianne, but not until you are sure. Not until enough time has passed that you can come to me with a clear conscience and a full heart." Marianne squeezed his hand. "I am already sure, Xavier. I have never been more sure of anything in my life. But you are right that we should wait, for appearances, if nothing else. The town already talks about us. We should not give them more ammunition." They agreed to wait a full year after Gerald's death before making any public declaration. In the meantime, they continued as they had been, working together during the day and sharing quiet evenings by the fire. But now there was an understanding between them, an acknowledgement of the love that was growing stronger with each passing day. The summer was beautiful that year. The meadows bloomed with wildflowers, and the cattle grew fat on the rich grass. Xavier taught Marianne to ride, first on gentle old Ruby, then on a spirited young mare he had been training. Marianne proved to be a natural horsewoman, and soon she was riding out with Xavier to check on the herd. On one of these rides, they stopped by a stream to water the horses and rest. The day was hot, and Marianne removed her boots to wade in the cool water. Xavier joined her, rolling up his pant legs and laughing as the cold made him gasp. "This reminds me of when I was a boy," he said. "My brothers and I would sneak away from our chores to swim in the creek near our farm. My father would tan our hides when he found out, but it was worth it." "I never learned to swim," Marianne admitted. "There were no creeks or streams near our home in New York, just dirty city water you would not want to touch." "I could teach you," Xavier offered. "Not here, the stream is too shallow, but there is a swimming hole about a mile from here. The water is deep and clean. We could go there sometime." Marianne felt a flutter of excitement at the idea. "I would like that." They went to the swimming hole the following week, on a day so hot that even the chickens were too lethargic to peck for food. Marianne wore an old dress that she did not mind getting wet, and Xavier wore just his trousers. When they reached the water, he waded in first, testing the depth and temperature. "It is perfect," he called back to Marianne. "Come on in." Marianne stepped into the water cautiously, feeling the cool liquid rise around her ankles, her calves, her knees. Xavier held out his hand to her and she took it, letting him guide her deeper. "The key is to relax," Xavier instructed. "Your body wants to float naturally, you just have to trust it and let it happen." He showed her how to float on her back, supporting her with his hands until she found her balance. Marianne stared up at the blue sky, feeling the sun on her face and the water holding her up, and she felt free in a way she never had before. Xavier's hands were warm against her back, steady and sure. "You are doing it," he said, his voice full of pride. "You are floating all on your own." Marianne laughed with delight, and the sound echoed across the water. They spent the afternoon there, with Xavier teaching her basic strokes and encouraging her progress. When they finally emerged, both exhausted and happy, the sun was beginning to set. As they rode back to the ranch, Marianne felt Xavier's eyes on her. "What is it?" she asked. "I am just thinking about how lucky I am," Xavier said. "That frozen trail brought you to my door. I know the circumstances were terrible, and I would never wish what happened to you on anyone. But I cannot help feeling grateful that you are here, that I get to know you and care for you. You have brought light into my life, Marianne. You have made this place feel like a home instead of just a house." Marianne felt tears prick her eyes. "You saved my life, Xavier, in more ways than one. Before I came here, I was just drifting, trying to survive. Now I feel like I am actually living. You gave me that." They rode the rest of the way in comfortable silence, but when they reached the barn and dismounted, Xavier pulled Marianne into his arms and held her close. She could feel his heart beating against her cheek, strong and steady. "I love you," he whispered into her hair. "I know we said we would wait, but I need you to know. I love you with everything I am." "I love you too," Marianne replied, her voice muffled against his chest. "More than I ever thought possible." They stood there in the barn as the light faded, holding each other, until finally they pulled apart and went inside to make dinner. But something had shifted between them. The love they felt was no longer just an unspoken understanding. It was real and acknowledged and growing stronger every day. As autumn approached, Xavier began making plans for the winter ahead. He repaired the barn roof, stocked up on supplies, and cut enough firewood to last through the coldest months. Marianne helped with all of it, proving herself to be a capable and tireless worker. "You have turned into a real ranch woman," Xavier told her one day as they stacked wood together. "When you first arrived, you could barely walk. Now look at you, strong and capable and able to handle anything this land throws at you." "I had a good teacher," Marianne replied with a smile. "And a good reason to learn." In October, Xavier had to make a trip to Helena to sell some of his horses. He asked Marianne if she wanted to come along, and she eagerly agreed. It would be her first time back in town since Gerald's burial, and she was nervous about facing the gossip and curious stares. But Xavier was beside her the whole time, his presence a solid comfort. They went to the general store for supplies, and the proprietor, a kindly older woman named Mrs. Henderson, greeted Marianne warmly. "It is good to see you looking so well, my dear," Mrs. Henderson said. "I was worried about you after the funeral, but it seems ranch life agrees with you." "It does," Marianne confirmed. "Mr. Zimmerman has been very kind to employ me." Mrs. Henderson gave her a knowing look. "I am sure he has. He is a good man, that one. You could do worse." They completed their shopping and headed back to the ranch, the wagon loaded with supplies. On the way home, they stopped at a spot where the view of the mountains was particularly spectacular. Xavier helped Marianne down from the wagon, and they stood together, watching the sun set behind the peaks. "Marianne," Xavier said suddenly, "I know we agreed to wait until a full year had passed after Gerald's death, but I do not think I can wait that long, not to ask you properly anyway. We do not have to marry right away if you do not want to, but I need you to know that I want you as my wife. Will you marry me?" Marianne's breath caught in her throat. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, Xavier, I will marry you. I do not care what people say or think. I know what my heart tells me, and it tells me that you are the man I am meant to be with." Xavier pulled a simple gold band from his pocket. "I bought this in Helena today. It is not fancy, but it is real gold, and it is made to last, like my love for you." He slipped the ring onto Marianne's finger, and it fit perfectly. Marianne looked at it, tears streaming down her face, then threw her arms around Xavier's neck and kissed him. It was their first real kiss, and it felt like coming home. They decided to marry in the spring, giving them time to prepare and allowing a decent interval to pass after Gerald's death. Marianne wrote letters to a few acquaintances back in New York, informing them of her upcoming marriage. The responses were mixed. Some congratulated her, while others expressed concern about the speed of her remarriage. But Marianne did not care. She knew what she wanted, and she was done living her life according to other people's expectations. The winter of 1884 into 1885 was harsh, with heavy snows and bitter cold. But inside the cabin, Marianne and Xavier were warm and content. They spent the long evenings planning their future together, talking about the improvements they would make to the ranch and the family they hoped to have. "How many children do you want?" Marianne asked one night as they sat by the fire. "As many as the good Lord sees fit to give us," Xavier replied with a smile. "But I hope for at least 3 or 4. I grew up in a big family, and despite my father's strictness, I have good memories of having brothers and sisters. What about you?" "I always wanted siblings," Marianne said. "Being an only child was lonely sometimes. I would love to have a house full of children, all the noise and chaos that comes with them." Xavier reached over and took her hand. "Then that is what we will have. A house full of love and laughter and little ones running around." When spring finally arrived, it came with a rush of warmth and new life. The snow melted, revealing green grass beneath. Birds returned, filling the air with song. And on a beautiful morning in April, Marianne Thompson became Marianne Zimmerman. The wedding was small, held at the ranch with just the preacher and a few close friends from town as witnesses. Marianne wore a simple white dress she had made herself, and Xavier wore his best suit, his hair neatly combed and his face freshly shaved. They exchanged vows standing on the porch of the cabin, with the mountains as their backdrop. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Xavier kissed Marianne with a tenderness that made her heart soar. This was nothing like her first wedding, hurried and impersonal. This was real. This was love. After the ceremony, they shared a meal with their guests, then sent everyone home so they could be alone. As the sun set, Xavier carried Marianne over the threshold of the cabin, both of them laughing. "Welcome home, Mrs. Zimmerman," Xavier said, setting her down gently. "I have been home for over a year now," Marianne replied. "But thank you for everything, for saving me, for loving me, for being the husband I did not know I deserved." "You deserve all the happiness in the world," Xavier said seriously. "And I am going to spend the rest of my life trying to give it to you." That night, as they lay together in Xavier's bed, now their bed, Marianne felt a peace and contentment she had never known. The frozen trail that had brought her to Xavier's door had seemed like a curse at the time, the worst thing that could have happened. But now she saw it for what it truly was, a blessing in disguise, a path that had led her to exactly where she was meant to be. The months that followed were blissful. Marianne threw herself into her role as Xavier's wife, managing the household and helping with the ranch work. She proved to have a good head for business, and together she and Xavier made decisions about what stock to buy and sell, what improvements to make, and how to grow their operation. In the fall, Marianne discovered she was pregnant. The news filled both her and Xavier with joy and excitement. They spent the winter preparing for the baby, with Xavier building a cradle and Marianne sewing tiny clothes. "What do you hope for?" Marianne asked one night as Xavier worked on the cradle. "A boy or a girl? I just hope for healthy," Xavier replied. "But if I had to choose, I think I would like a son. Someone to teach everything to pass the ranch on to someday. But a daughter would be wonderful too, especially if she has your beautiful eyes." "I think I want a boy first as well," Marianne admitted. "A little version of you, with your strength and kindness." Their son was born in May of 1886, during a thunderstorm that rattled the windows and made the cabin shake. Xavier delivered the baby himself, having no time to fetch the doctor from town. Marianne labored for hours, and there were moments when Xavier feared he would lose her, when her face turned pale and her strength seemed to fail. But she fought through, and when the baby finally came, his cries were strong and healthy. "A boy," Xavier said, his voice choked with emotion as he placed the tiny bundle in Marianne's arms. "We have a son." They named him Thomas after Marianne's father, Thomas Xavier Zimmerman. He had his father's dark hair and his mother's blue eyes, and from the moment he entered the world, he owned their hearts completely. Watching Xavier with their son filled Marianne with a love so powerful it sometimes hurt. Xavier was a natural father, patient and gentle, singing lullabies in his deep voice and walking the floor with Thomas when he fussed. He built toys for the baby and told him stories, even though Thomas was too young to understand. "You are going to spoil him," Marianne teased one afternoon as she watched Xavier show Thomas a wooden horse he had carved. "That is what fathers are for," Xavier replied with a grin. "Mothers are for discipline and fathers are for spoiling. Everyone knows that." "I think you have it backwards," Marianne laughed. "But I do not mind. He is lucky to have you as a father." As Thomas grew from infant to toddler, the ranch continued to prosper. Xavier's reputation as a fair dealer and skilled rancher spread, and he was able to command good prices for his stock. They hired a young man named Sam to help with the work, allowing Xavier to spend more time with his family. Marianne proved to be a wonderful mother, finding a balance between tenderness and firmness that helped Thomas grow into a bright, curious child. She taught him his letters and numbers, read to him every night, and encouraged his endless questions about the world around him. 2 years after Thomas was born, Marianne gave birth to twin daughters, Elizabeth and Emma. The twins were identical, with blonde hair and blue eyes, and they brought chaos and joy in equal measure to the household. Xavier built an addition onto the cabin to accommodate the growing family, adding 2 more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. Life was full and busy and wonderful. The ranch was thriving, the children were healthy, and the love between Marianne and Xavier only grew deeper with each passing year. They still sat together by the fire in the evenings when they could, though now they were often surrounded by children and toys and the beautiful mess of family life. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Xavier gave Marianne a beautiful locket engraved with their initials. Inside were tiny portraits of each of their children. "I wanted you to have something to carry them with you always," Xavier explained as he fastened it around her neck. "A reminder of the family we have built together." Marianne touched the locket, feeling the weight of it against her chest. Do you remember what you said to me that first night when I collapsed at your door? Xavier thought for a moment. I said a lot of things. Which part? You said everything would look different in the morning. And you were right. That morning was the beginning of this, of us, of everything good in my life. I was so lost and broken, and you put me back together. You showed me what love really means. Xavier pulled her into his arms. We put each other back together. I was alone and lonely before you came. You gave my life meaning and purpose beyond just surviving. You gave me a reason to hope and dream again. They stood there on the porch, watching the sun set over their land, the sounds of their children playing inside the cabin behind them. It was a perfect moment, one of many they had shared over the years. As the years passed, the Zimmerman family continued to grow. Marianne gave birth to 2 more children, another son named William and a daughter named Grace. The cabin had to be expanded again, becoming more of a proper house, with Xavier and Sam doing most of the construction work themselves. Thomas grew into a strong, capable young man who shared his father's love of ranching. The twins were inseparable, bright and mischievous, always getting into some kind of trouble. William was quiet and thoughtful, happiest when he had a book in his hands. And little Grace was the baby of the family, spoiled by everyone and completely aware of her power. The ranch had grown significantly over the years. Xavier now employed several men full-time, and his herd numbered in the hundreds. He had built a reputation as one of the most successful ranchers in the territory, and people came from miles around seeking his advice. But despite their prosperity, Xavier and Marianne never forgot their humble beginnings. They were generous to those in need, often giving work to men who were down on their luck and donating to the church and community causes. They remembered what it was like to have nothing, and they were determined to use their blessings to help others. Marianne had become a pillar of the community as well, organizing charity drives and teaching Sunday school at the church. The women who had once gossiped about her living arrangements with Xavier now sought her friendship and counsel. She had proven herself through years of hard work and dedication, and she had earned their respect. One evening, when they had been married for nearly 15 years, Marianne and Xavier sat on the porch watching another magnificent sunset. The children were all inside, occupied with various activities, giving their parents a rare moment of peace. "You ever think about that night?" Marianne asked. "The night I showed up at your door, half frozen and desperate." "I think about it often," Xavier admitted. "I think about how easily things could have gone differently. If the storm had been worse, if you had missed the cabin in the dark, if I had not been home, any one of those things, and we would not be here now." "I used to think it was all just terrible luck," Marianne said. "The robbery, Gerald's death, being lost in the wilderness. But now I see it differently. It was not luck at all. It was fate or providence or whatever you want to call it. I was meant to find you. We were meant to be together." Xavier reached over and took her hand, the same way he had done countless times over the years. "I am grateful every single day for that frozen trail that brought you to me. You are my everything, Marianne. You and the children, this life we have built. I could not ask for more." "Neither could I," Marianne agreed. "You have been the husband I did not even know to hope for. You have given me love, security, family, and purpose. You kept your promise, Xavier. You have been the husband I deserve, and so much more." They sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, watching as the sun disappeared behind the mountains and the stars began to appear. Inside the house, they could hear the children laughing and arguing and living their lives. Outside, the land stretched out before them, beautiful and wild in theirs. It had been a long journey from that terrible night when Marianne stumbled through the snow in her wedding dress, running for her life. But every step had been worth it to arrive here, at this moment, with this man, in this life they had created together. The ranch continued to thrive as the children grew older. Thomas took on more responsibility, working alongside his father and learning everything about running the operation. He had his father's steady temperament and his mother's quick mind, a combination that served him well. At 20 years old, he had become Xavier's right hand, and everyone knew that one day the ranch would be his. The twins, now 18, had grown into beautiful young women who were sought after by every eligible bachelor in the territory. But they were in no hurry to marry, preferring to help their mother with the household and pursue their own interests. Elizabeth had a talent for music and could play the piano beautifully, while Emma had inherited her mother's love of books and dreamed of becoming a teacher. William, at 16, was preparing to go east to college. He wanted to study law, a decision that Xavier supported even though it meant losing his son for several years. Grace, at 13, was still very much a child, though she was beginning to show signs of the woman she would become. One spring morning, as Marianne was working in her garden, she looked up to see a stagecoach approaching the house. Visitors were not uncommon, but something about this particular coach caught her attention. It stopped in front of the house, and a well-dressed older gentleman stepped out. "Excuse me, madam," the man said, removing his hat. "I am looking for Marianne Thompson. I was told she might be found at this ranch." "I am Marianne Zimmerman, formerly Thompson," Marianne said, standing and brushing the dirt from her hands. "How can I help you?" The man's face lit up. "Then I have found you at last. My name is Jonathan Morrison. I am an attorney from New York. I have been searching for you for nearly 2 years on behalf of your late mother's sister, Catherine Hartwell." Marianne felt her heart skip. "My mother had a sister. I never knew that." "Apparently, there was a falling out years before you were born, and they lost contact," Mr. Morrison explained. "Your aunt has been trying to locate you since she learned of your parents' deaths. She recently passed away herself, and her will names you as her sole heir." Marianne sat down heavily on the porch steps, stunned. "I do not understand. An heir to what?" Mr. Morrison smiled. "Your aunt was a very wealthy woman, Mrs. Zimmerman. She never married and had no children of her own. She left you her entire estate, including property in New York valued at over $50,000, as well as stocks and bonds worth considerably more. You are, if you will pardon my saying so, a very rich woman." Xavier had come out of the barn upon seeing the stagecoach and now stood beside Marianne, his hand on her shoulder. "This is quite a shock, sir. Are you certain you have the right person?" "Quite certain," Mr. Morrison assured him. "I have all the documentation here. Mrs. Zimmerman, or rather her representative, will need to travel to New York to sign some papers and make decisions about the estate. But everything is in order, I assure you." After Mr. Morrison left, promising to return with more information, Marianne and Xavier sat together trying to process what had just happened. $50,000, Marianne said, her voice dazed. "Plus more in stocks and bonds. Xavier, that is more money than I can even imagine." "What do you want to do?" Xavier asked. "Do you want to go to New York, see the property, make decisions about it?" Marianne looked around at the ranch, at the house they had built together, at the land they had worked so hard to cultivate. "I want nothing to do with New York or that property. This is my home. These mountains, this ranch, you and the children, this is my life. But the money could do so much good." They talked long into the night about what to do with Marianne's unexpected inheritance. In the end, they decided to keep some of it as security for their children's futures, donate a significant portion to various charities, and use the rest to improve the ranch and help the community. Xavier insisted that the money was Marianne's to do with as she pleased. "It is your inheritance, not ours. You should decide." But Marianne shook her head. Everything I have is ours, Xavier. We are partners in all things. This money will benefit our family and our community. That is what I want. They used part of the inheritance to build a school in Helena, ensuring that all children in the area would have access to education regardless of their family's financial situations. They improved their ranch, building better facilities for the animals and housing for the workers. They helped several neighboring ranchers who were struggling, offering loans with generous terms. The generosity of the Zimmermans became legendary in the territory, but they did not do it for recognition. They did it because they remembered what it was like to struggle, to be uncertain about the future, to need help and kindness from others. As their 25th wedding anniversary approached, Xavier planned a surprise for Marianne. He arranged for all their children to help him organize a party, inviting everyone they knew in the territory. When the day arrived, Marianne was shocked to find their ranch filled with people, all there to celebrate their love and partnership. The governor of the territory was there, as were judges, businessmen, ranchers, farmers, and ordinary folk whose lives had been touched by the Zimmermans' kindness. There were speeches and toasts, music and dancing, and enough food to feed an army. But the best moment came when Xavier stood up to speak. He pulled Marianne to her feet beside him and addressed the crowd. 25 years ago, on a frozen winter night, a woman stumbled to my door. She was lost, injured, and desperate. I took her in because it was the right thing to do, never imagining that she would become the center of my entire world. Marianne, you have made me happier than I ever thought possible. You have given me children I adore, a partnership I treasure, and a love that grows stronger every single day. I said once that I would be the husband you deserve, and I have spent every day since trying to live up to that promise. I love you more than words can say. Marianne was crying openly now, as were many of the guests. Xavier Zimmerman, you saved my life in every way a person can be saved. You gave me hope when I had none, love when I thought I would never find it, and a family I cherish more than anything. You have been everything I needed and more than I ever dared to dream of. I love you with all my heart, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond. They kissed as the crowd erupted in cheers and applause. It was a perfect moment, a celebration of everything they had built together over a quarter of a century. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges, but also joys and triumphs. Thomas married a lovely young woman named Sarah and took over the day-to-day running of the ranch, allowing Xavier to slow down a bit. The twins both married as well, Elizabeth to a doctor and Emma to a teacher, staying close enough that they could visit often. William became a successful lawyer in San Francisco, but returned home every year for extended visits. Grace, the baby, surprised everyone by becoming a champion horsewoman and starting her own breeding operation on land adjacent to the family ranch. Xavier and Marianne became grandparents many times over, their house often filled with the sounds of grandchildren running and playing. They had built something lasting, a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. On a warm summer evening, when they were both in their 60s, Xavier and Marianne sat on the porch as they had done countless times before. Xavier's hair was now silver, and Marianne's blonde had faded to a soft white. Their hands, clasped together as always, were weathered and scarred from years of hard work, but their love was as strong as ever. "You remember what you asked me that first night," Xavier said suddenly. "You asked me where you were." "I remember," Marianne replied. "And you told me I was in your cabin, 15 miles outside of Helena. I was so scared and confused." "If you could go back," Xavier asked, "knowing everything that was going to happen, would you still get on that stagecoach with Gerald?" Marianne was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Yes, she finally said. Because as terrible as that night was, it led me here. It led me to you. And I would go through it all again, every moment of fear and pain, if it meant I would end up right here, right now with you. Xavier kissed her hand gently. I used to think I was content living alone, that I did not need anyone. But then you came into my life and showed me what I was missing. You taught me how to love, how to be part of something bigger than myself. You gave me purpose and joy and a reason to wake up every morning with gratitude. They sat together as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant colors. The mountains stood eternal and beautiful in the distance. The ranch stretched out before them, prosperous and peaceful. Their children and grandchildren were happy and healthy. It was everything they had worked for, everything they had dreamed of. Years later, when both Xavier and Marianne had passed peacefully in their sleep within months of each other, their family gathered to remember them. The funeral was held at the ranch they had built together, and people came from all over the territory to pay their respects. Thomas stood before the gathered crowd and told the story he had heard so many times growing up. The story of how his mother had stumbled through a frozen wilderness and found his father's door. How his father had taken her in and saved her life. How they had fallen in love and built something beautiful together. My parents taught us that love is not just a feeling, Thomas said, his voice strong despite his grief. It is a choice you make every day. It is kindness and patience and partnership. It is building something together that is stronger than either of you could build alone. They showed us what it means to be truly devoted to another person, and their love story will continue to inspire our family for generations to come. The ranch remained in the family, passed down through the generations. The house that Xavier had built with his own hands was carefully maintained, becoming almost a shrine to the love that had started there. Children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren grew up hearing the story of Xavier and Marianne, of the frozen trail that brought them together, and of the promise Xavier had made to be the husband Marianne deserved. And in every generation, couples would stand on that same porch where Xavier and Marianne had spent so many evenings, looking out at those same mountains, and they would promise each other the same devotion, the same partnership, the same enduring love. The frozen trail that had once seemed like such a tragedy had become the foundation of a legacy. It had brought a lost bride to a lonely cowboy's door, and from that meeting had sprung a love that transformed not just two lives but countless others. The Zimmerman Ranch stood as a testament to what could be built when two people chose each other every single day, through hardship and triumph, through ordinary moments and extraordinary ones. Xavier and Marianne's story became legend in Montana, told and retold until it took on an almost mythical quality. But those who had known them personally remembered the simple truth at the heart of it all. Two people had found each other against impossible odds, had chosen love over fear, and had built a life together that mattered. The graves of Xavier and Marianne stood side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, their headstones simple but elegant. Visitors often left flowers there, honoring not just the couple but the idea they represented. That love could flourish in the harshest conditions. That kindness to a stranger could change the course of lives. That promises made from the heart could be kept for a lifetime. As seasons turned and years passed, as Montana changed and grew, the Zimmerman Ranch remained a constant. The land that Xavier had worked so hard to cultivate continued to prosper under the care of his descendants. The house where he had sheltered a frozen, desperate woman, and then fallen in love with her, stood strong against wind and weather. And sometimes, on winter nights when the wind howled and the snow fell heavy, people swore they could see two figures on that porch. A tall man and a slender woman standing close together, their hands clasped, looking out at the mountains they had loved, watching over the legacy they had built. Together, as they had always been, the frozen trail had brought a lost bride to a cowboy's door. The cowboy had said he would be the husband she deserved. And for over 40 years, through joy and sorrow, through plenty and want, through every challenge life could throw at them, he had kept that promise. They both had. They had chosen each other, built something beautiful together, and created a love story that would endure long after they were gone. It was a story of second chances and new beginnings, of kindness repaid and promises kept, of love that grew from the smallest seeds into something mighty and enduring. It was the story of Xavier and Marianne Zimmerman, and it would be told as long as there were people who believed in the transforming power of love.